Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the delicious butter you'd been putting on your table for years was no longer available. Worse still, no one can tell you when it will return. This is exactly the kind of day America in 1950 woke up to. This first sentence still resonates with thousands of older Americans who remember those years, because no one imagined that butter, milk, or even cheese would suddenly become a luxury. But that fear, so commonplace, suddenly descended upon every home. And it wasn't just a food shortage, it was a lack of trust. The early 1950s were a time of hope for America. The war was over, young families were setting up home, and the sound of newborn babies brought joy to the streets. But just then, something no one expected happened. Supermarket shelves began to empty. First, butter disappeared, then milk dwindled. Newspapers called it a butter panic, but the real panic was in the hearts of the people. So how did a giant country like America suddenly become unable to find butter? The answer to this question is astonishing, even in today's world. In the post-war period, governments imposed quotas to keep prices of agricultural products from falling. But this time, the quotas were too tight. Farmers weren't producing enough. As production fell, prices rose. As prices rose, people began to stockpile. As stockpiling continued, shelves emptied. As shelves emptied, fear grew. Thus, not only did butter erode, but people's confidence in the future also eroded. There's an unforgettable scene in old American neighborhoods back in those days. Parents would drag their grocery carts, list in hand, but they couldn't find that item. Milk? No. Butter? None at all. Cheese? Rare. When the children of that day grew up, they always talked about it this way. When my mother couldn't find butter, she would bite her lips and silently push the grocery cart back. We kids haven't forgotten that look. That's the kind of silence that truly represents scarcity, because butter wasn't just a food. In those years, it was the heart of American cuisine, it was the scent of breakfast, it was the warmth of holiday tables, and one day, that scent disappeared. When people couldn't find butter, they turned to margarine, but margarine was considered a cold and foreign food in those days. Yes, it may seem ordinary today, but to the older people of those times, margarine was the taste of despair. So how did this despair grow so large? How did it spread so quickly? The answer to this question lay hidden behind the scenes of the crisis. Because the 1950 shortage wasn't limited to grocery stores, milk trucks were delayed for weeks. Milk portions given to children in schools were reduced. In some areas, there were no deliveries at all. Radio broadcasts announced milk supply problems continue, and mothers, yes, they were hit the hardest. Hundreds of families, unable to find milk to make baby formula, flooded radio programs with letters. One mother wrote, "Imagine a country winning wars, preparing for space, but unable to help a mother find milk for her baby." This sentence is the most poignant image of the 1950s. You might not believe it, but the crisis shook not only home kitchens, but even American politics. Heated debates erupted in Congress. Agricultural policies were changed. The most common question at presidential press conferences was not about the war, not about the economy. It was simply, when will we be able to buy butter? Imagine a country. Its agenda was butter, but that was just the surface. Beneath the crisis lay a much larger crack, and now the story is heading right there, because economic failures weren't the only factors behind this famine. There was another darker reason that was overlooked, that no one talked about, and that only came to light years later. While the newspapers blared butter shortage, a quieter yet deeper sentence was whispered in homes. I wonder what will feed the children tomorrow. The 1950s in America are remembered by many as a colorful, joyful post-war era filled with hope. But some kitchens during those same years were silent because there was no butter to put on the table. Imagine the tension an average mother faces as supermarket shelves begin to empty. You're waiting in line to buy milk, your child is cold. As you approach the checkout, the clerk turns the sign and displays the sign "out." At that moment, a small crack hits people's hearts. This disruption was profound. It wasn't just a shortage of one product. Americans had long been accustomed to abundance, The war was over, the economy was believed to be reviving, but when butter disappeared one day, people remembered for the first time, what if one day we can't afford anything at all? Butter was a symbol of the warmth of home, the family table, and post-war hopes, so its absence left a deeper void in people's hearts than they realized. The origins of the famine were complex. Rising population, fluctuations in agricultural production, price pressures, farmers struggling with costs. In short, the tip of the iceberg was just the butter lines. Behind the scenes, there was a period when America's agricultural economy was slowly and quietly beginning to struggle. Elderly Americans, especially, remember those years even today. One day we went to the grocery store and there was no butter. The next day we went again and there was still no butter. Then we learned that everyone had started saving butter. This hoarding behavior, exacerbated the crisis. One person's fear amplified another's. Scarcity manifested itself not only on the shelves during such times, but also in the trust people had in one another. Arguments while waiting in line, envious glances directed at the neighbor who could find butter. A small piece of butter saved for the children was treated as a precious item within the family. In those days, people learned how fragile abundance truly was, and unknowingly, they were heading toward a much more significant turning point. This seemingly simple butter crisis was one of the first small signs of the much larger economic turmoil that would come to America. Following the innocent kitchen crisis of the 1950s, the invisible cracks in the economy began to widen, and the footsteps of the harsher blows America would suffer in the years to come gradually became audible. The butter and milk shortage wasn't just a grocery store crisis that lasted a few months. It was a psychological wave that changed behaviors, ways of thinking, and even the way people viewed each other in homes. Because once people experienced the feeling of lack, that feeling didn't go away easily. This was precisely what happened in 1950s America. Even if supermarket shelves were occasionally stocked, no one felt truly at ease. While things seemed to be returning to normal on the surface, a major shift in habits had begun within homes. Saving, and using sparingly. All of these behaviors had become almost a hidden reflex for the time. Psychologists later dubbed this famine memory. Even after the famine passed, the shadow of scarcity lingered in people's homes for a long time. The phrase became commonplace in American kitchens. It's here for now, but what if it runs out again? This phrase encapsulated the spirit of the times. Many families began cutting their butter thinner and preparing smaller portions. Some turned to margarine, which was still a controversial, even uncool product at the time. The little dye packets given to margarine to give it a yellow color became a memorable detail of this peculiar era in America. More strikingly, people began stockpiling not just butter, but many other staples: flour, sugar, canned goods. In short, everything became part of the "I'll need it someday" sentence. But this new attitude began to create an invisible pressure on society. Even among neighbors, a small unrest was rising. Who had stockpiled how much? Who had oversold? Who was early? Even if people weren't speaking openly, everyone was weighing and measuring each other. The lack of butter also eroded the trust people had in each other. This period also had another silent consequence. The concept of homemaking began to gain strength. Women turned to more creative solutions in the kitchen and developed more economical recipes. Some recipe books became popular under the influence of this period because they all promised the same thing: ways to make the same flavor with fewer ingredients. Behind these recipes lay a much deeper truth. Families no longer knew if the era of plenty would return. Yes, from the outside America appeared strong, but the quiet anxiety inside the kitchens painted a different picture. Economic indicators don't always reflect the public mood. Sometimes even a small food crisis can shift the minds of millions. The butter shortage did exactly that. Unnoticed, it opened a new chapter in the public consciousness, and this new chapter foreshadowed the much larger economic transformations America would experience in the coming years. Now everything seemed calm, but the economy is never as calm as it seems. The butter and milk shortages of 1950 appeared to be a simple production problem from the outside, but in reality, it was a sign of a much deeper, much quieter rupture in America at the time, because behind this famine were post-war economic pressures, sudden demographic shifts, political tensions, disruptions in agricultural markets, and people's psychological exhaustion. A little bit of everything, but nothing was truly under control. Let's start with the basics. World War II had only been over for 5 years. When the war ended, people thought a peaceful era was beginning, but the economy didn't recover so easily. Millions of soldiers returned home, millions of new families were formed, millions of new babies were born. The baby boom began. This massive boom transformed the country's food demand overnight. Milk, butter, eggs, and all dairy products consumed at breakfast all suddenly became in higher demand. But the agricultural sector was still recovering from the war years. Farms lacked adequate equipment. The workforce was scarce. Transportation disruptions persisted in some areas. In short, the war was over, but the shadow of war lingered on the economy. Demand increased, but production couldn't keep up, and this laid the foundation for the famine. But the most striking aspect was government policies. In the post-war period, the government began imposing price limits on certain agricultural products to control inflation. But these limits had a significant consequence. Producers could no longer profit from selling milk at low prices, and they began to shift to more profitable products. Producers didn't think, let's produce more butter, because prices were suppressed. Consequently, milk production fell further and further. Sometimes a product shortage on the shelves isn't due to a natural disaster. Sometimes it's simply human behavior. This is exactly what happened in 1950. The government, with good intentions, wanted to control inflation, but the result was an invisible famine in the country. There was another major factor. America was sending massive amounts of aid to Europe after the war. Food, powdered milk, butter. This aid under the Marshall Plan kept Europe afloat, but it also depleted American stocks. In many warehouses, dairy products that would normally be destined for the domestic market were sent to Europe. America was helping, but the shortages in its own kitchens were growing. This paradox is one of the tragic aspects of history. While mothers at home couldn't find milk in the kitchen, the country sent tons of aid across the ocean, created a sense of injustice in the eyes of some people. This feeling further deepened the psychological dimension of the famine. Another critical point of the period was the midst of a technological transformation. Modern agricultural machinery was becoming widespread, but not every farm nationwide had this technology. Some still produced using old methods. Some were struggling to adapt to innovations. This transition period led to an imbalance in production volumes. While milk production in some states was at normal levels, others experienced sharp declines. Distribution, however, was not as robust in those years as it is today. Even if a shortage in one city went unnoticed in another, the psychological resonance spread throughout the United States. In 1950, America hadn't yet experienced major inflation, but people expected major inflation. Such expectations make the economy feel worse than it actually is. When milk ran out in the supermarkets, the first thought that came to people's minds was, I wonder if prices will rise even more. Some quickly stocked up to keep it from getting more expensive. This wave of fear-driven buying made the shortage even more visible. Economists call this anticipatory inflation. In other words, people's fear exacerbates the problem before it actually begins. This was also evident in the 1950 butter crisis. A food crisis isn't just about the emptiness of the stomach. It creates a sense of insecurity in the mind. In 1950, millions of Americans realized there may not always be plenty of everything, and this realization left a deep mark on people's shopping habits, their understanding of savings, and their food habits for years to come. The habit of some elderly people keeping endless supplies of spare butter in their refrigerators for years to come is precisely a relic of that era. The invisible yet most powerful effect of famine, lasting memory traces. The butter and milk shortage was the first stirring of a long economic period that America would experience. This seemingly small crisis was one of the first links in the chain that led to the agricultural reforms of the mid-1950s, the consumer revolution of the 1960s, the oil crisis of the 1970s, and the hyperinflationary period of the 1980s. It is one of the most fascinating features of history that a food crisis can shed light on the great waves to come. The 1950 famine did exactly that. A tiny butter shortage made visible the cracks in a vast economy, and it caused millions of people to ask themselves for the first time, are we safe? Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.